Whispers Beneath the Tombstones, Echoes of the Resurrectionists by Astra Wolf.
The sepulchral fog rolled over the desolate cemetery of Hollow's End, cloaking its secrets in a shroud of ethereal mist. Elijah Thornton lay on his deathbed, the gravedigger's raspy breaths echoing softly in the dimly lit room of his humble abode. The flickering candle cast treacherous shadows upon the walls, lending an air of foreboding to the scene. Elijah, once a tower of silent strength amid the graves, now appeared fragile, consumed by the relentless march of time. His confession had drawn a modest gathering, each attendee tethered to his past by cords of fate and intrigue. First among those present was Henry Thornton, Elijah's estranged son, staring blankly at the husk of a man he barely knew. Resentment and curiosity waged a subtle war within him, whispering reminders of lost years and broken words that had constructed an invisible wall between father and son, a wall even this moment of revelation seemed unlikely to breach.
Beside Henry stood Nurse Margaret Bell, her heart filled with compassion, her hands expertly maneuvered around Elijah, ensuring his comfort with gentle care. She had been his steadfast companion during the declining years, a woman of duty and warmth, kindness flowing endlessly from her soul.
Hovering at the periphery, Father Jonathan Everard observed the scene with a mixture of trepidation and anticipation. The young priest was a seeker of truths buried beneath layers of earthly deceit, his resolve fortified by a crisis of faith that gnawed relentlessly at his spirit. Elijah's cryptic intonation had piqued Jonathan's interest, promising not just adventure, but a chance to reconcile his wavering belief with tangible deeds. "Beneath the stones, treasures rest," Elijah murmured, his voice a fragile echo in the room. "False names, given life by those who wish to deceive even in death. Secrets buried by my own hands." Jonathan leaned forward, the gravity of Elijah's confession planting a seed of urgency in his mind. "What secrets, Elijah? What burdens do you carry to the grave?" Elijah's eyes fluttered open, hoary and devoid of the vigor they once held. "A society, shadows, and whispers. I knew too little, yet enough to haunt these final days. They sought to conquer death, but awakened something far worse." Henry, despite his reticent demeanor, found himself leaning into the tale. "Shadows and whispers? What do you mean?" Each word was a laborious endeavor for Elijah, yet he pressed on, driven by an invisible force. Resurrectionist Society, they called themselves, paid handsomely for silence, for blind obedience to their dark purpose.
Margaret squeezed Elijah's hand, grounding him in the present as his consciousness threatened to drift. "Rest, Elijah. You're safe now."
Elijah's lips curled into a meager smile, a flicker of relief amid the shroud of his suffering. "Map beneath the floorboard. Decipher it, Father. Let not their evil escape again." Jonathan's eyes gleamed with resolve. His quest began at the crux of Elijah's confession, his mind already racing through possibilities, forming the contours of a plan. A map, hidden yet central to the gravedigger's entanglement with dark forces. It was to be his beacon in the encroaching tempest. As Elijah's breath waned, Father Jonathan, Henry, and Margaret gathered closer, unified by the silent oath to honor the old gravedigger's dying wish. Elijah's vigil would yield more than sorrow, for beneath the teardrops and whispers, the soil itself promised revelation. "Rest now, Elijah," Father Jonathan whispered softly, closing his eyes momentarily in solemn prayer. The gravedigger's breaths grew shallow, marking the precursive silence before the storm of discovery and danger. The night deepened, and the candle's flame flickered weakly as Elijah Thornton, the keeper of Hollow's End's forgotten lore, released his final breath, his secrets echoing infinitely in the whispers beneath the tombstones. Father Jonathan, emboldened by his promise to Elijah, set forth toward the old gravedigger's quarters. The small abode reeked of mildew and dust, an aroma of spectral neglect. Yet beneath its creaking floorboards lay a treasure of a different kind, a map whose symbols whispered of forgotten paths and forbidden knowledge.
Margaret arrived soon after, her presence offering comfort and companionship as Jonathan began his task. Together they cleared the room, revealing the hidden board that Elijah had alluded to in his final moments. With care, Jonathan pried it loose, revealing an ancient parchment inscribed with cryptic marks.
"Look at this," Jonathan said, a trembling excitement lurking beneath his placid exterior. "It's not just a map, it's a puzzle."
Margaret examined the parchment alongside him. Elijah spoke of treasures and deception, but this, it feels like something more profound.
Indeed, Jonathan agreed, his fingers tracing the faded ink. This map, it's guiding us somewhere. Not just to earthly riches, but perhaps to the very heart of the Resurrectionist Society.
We should proceed carefully, Father, Margaret advised, a note of warning in her voice. Elijah's tale hints at dangers we may not fully grasp.
Jonathan nodded, understanding the gravity of their undertaking. We must unravel this mystery, but not alone. We need someone with expertise in symbols and history. As the morning wore on, Jonathan and Margaret returned to the cemetery, Elijah's secret now shared among them. The tombstones loomed like silent sentinels, their inscriptions guardians of unspoken truths. Hollow's End, once merely a resting place for the departed, now became their gateway to a revelation poised on the brink of eternity. In the days that followed, Jonathan sought out an expert from the British Museum, a professor renowned for his knowledge of occult history and symbols. His name was Dr. Reginald Hawthorne, an eccentric figure whose scholarly pursuits had often strayed into the realm of the esoteric. "Ah, Father Everard," Reginald greeted, his eyes alight with interest. The map had captured his imagination immediately. "A truly fascinating piece you've brought me. Late Victorian?" The symbols suggest a mingling of Celtic and alchemical influences. Jonathan leaned forward, eager for insight. "Can you decipher it, Dr. Hawthorne? We believe it holds the key to unraveling something sinister." Reginald chuckled softly, his fingers dancing over the parchment. "Indeed, I shall endeavor to decode its mysteries. But tell me, what prompted this pursuit into the shadows of Hollow's End?" Jonathan recounted Elijah's tale, omitting none of the details that had ensnared his soul in this perilous quest. Reginald listened, his interest piqued by the interplay of historical intrigue and occult symbology. "The Resurrectionist Society," Reginald mused, his voice barely a whisper. "There are whispers of such a group, seeking to transcend death, a fool's errand fueled by the fear of mortality." "A fear that has led us here," Jonathan concluded, the weight of his resolve evident in his tone. "We must ensure that whatever they unearthed remains buried. Will you help us, Reginald?" Reginald met Jonathan's gaze, a fire of scholarly challenge igniting within him. "Indeed, Father. Let us brave these shadows together for the peace of the grave and the truth that must outlast time itself."
Margaret, with her nursing background, unearthed old medical records that hinted at the Society's involvement in the illegal trade of cadavers for anatomical study, a practice both necessary and reviled in a time when medical science was advancing beyond the moral constraints of the era.
"It's disturbing," Margaret noted one evening, poring over a ledger filled with coded entries. "These men played God, stealing bodies from their graves to dissect in secret. The pursuit of knowledge often walks hand in hand with moral transgression," Reginald replied, his voice tinged with both admiration and disapproval. "But their reach extended beyond mere anatomy. They sought the keys to life itself, dabbling in alchemy and the occult." Jonathan, meanwhile, scoured church records and local archives, piecing together the Society's network of influence. A web of corruption that stretched from the hallowed halls of academia to the shadowed alleyways of London's underbelly. "It's as if they were building a bridge between the living and the dead," Jonathan remarked, his mind grappling with the implications of their findings. But why? What did they hope to achieve? "Immortality, perhaps," Reginald suggested, leaning back in his chair, his eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight, "or power over death. Such ambitions are as old as humanity itself." As their understanding of the Society's motives deepened, so too did the danger surrounding them. Strange occurrences began to plague their investigation, shadows moving in the corners of their vision, whispered voices echoing in empty rooms, and the chilling sensation of being watched.
"I can't shake the feeling that we're being followed," Margaret confessed, her voice tinged with fear, as if the very ghosts of the past are intent on keeping their secrets buried.
"Fear not, Margaret," Jonathan replied, though his own unease was evident. "We are on the side of righteousness. Whatever specters haunt us, they are but echoes of the evil we seek to vanquish." Yet, as they ventured further into the heart of the mystery, the line between the natural and the supernatural blurred. The map, once a mere artifact, seemed to pulse with a life of its own, guiding them with an unerring precision towards a truth that defied explanation. One evening, as the trio gathered in Reginald's study, the atmosphere heavy with anticipation, they finally decoded the map's ultimate destination, a forgotten crypt beneath the very church where Jonathan preached. The final piece of the puzzle, Jonathan murmured, his voice a mixture of awe and dread. It ends where it began, in the shadow of the cross. Then let us go, Reginald declared, rising from his chair, for it is in the darkness that we shall find the light.
Armed with lanterns and a steely resolve, the trio descended into the bowels of the church, their footsteps echoing hollowly off the stone walls. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, as if the very building mourned the sins of those who had come before.
This place gives me the creeps, Margaret admitted, clutching her lantern tightly. I half expect the walls to start whispering. Stay close, Jonathan instructed, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his own soul. We must face whatever lies ahead together. As they reached the crypt, the air grew colder, the flickering lanterns casting eerie shadows that danced across the ancient stonework. Here, beneath the church, time seemed to stand still, the past and present converging in a moment of profound significance. This is it, Reginald announced, his voice hushed with reverence. The heart of the Society's secrets lies within. With trembling hands, Jonathan pushed open the heavy stone door, revealing a chamber filled with dusty tomes and alchemical instruments, a veritable treasure trove of forbidden knowledge.
Incredible, Margaret breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. It's as if we've stepped into another world.
A world built on ambition and hubris, Jonathan replied, his gaze sweeping over the room. But what drove them to such lengths? As they explored the crypt, piecing together the Society's dark history, they discovered the true nature of their experiments. A ritual designed to transcend death by transferring the soul from one body to another. This is madness, Reginald exclaimed, his voice filled with disbelief. They sought to play God, to defy the natural order. And in doing so, they unleashed something beyond their control, Jonathan concluded, the weight of his realizations settling heavily upon him. The truth, once unearthed, refused to be silenced. The air crackled with an otherworldly energy, as the spirits of those who had been wronged by the Society rose to confront their tormentors, their vengeful cries echoing through the crypt.
We have to get out of here, Margaret urged, her voice trembling with terror. This place is cursed.
No, Jonathan declared, his resolve unshaken. We must finish what we started. We must put these souls to rest. With a prayer on his lips, Jonathan led the group in a ritual of his own, invoking the power of the divine to cleanse the crypt of its malevolence. As the final words of the incantation echoed through the chamber, the spirits began to dissipate, their anguished cries fading into silence.
It's over, Margaret sighed, the tension leaving her body.
Not over, Jonathan corrected gently. We've merely closed one chapter of this dark tale. With the crypt's secrets laid bare, the trio emerged into the light of dawn, their hearts lighter for the knowledge that they had done their part to exorcise the demons of the past. The Resurrectionist Society may be gone, Reginald mused, but their legacy serves as a warning for those who would seek to defy the natural order. Indeed, Jonathan agreed, his faith renewed by the ordeal. Let us ensure that their story is not forgotten, so that others may learn from their folly. As they parted ways, each carrying with them the lessons of their journey, the echoes of the Resurrectionists faded into history, their whispers buried once more beneath the tombstones of Hollow's End. But as with all stories steeped in mystery and shadows, the end is often merely a new beginning. Beneath the tranquil veneer of Hollow's End, the whispers of the past stirred anew, beckoning those attuned to listen. Thus begins the next chapter in the lives of Jonathan, Reginald, and Margaret.
Margaret sat alone in her modest apartment, the dim glow of candlelight casting flickering shadows across the room. Her mind wandered back to the crypt, the sense of dread palpable even in memory. She reached for her glass of wine, the dark red liquid a poor substitute for comfort. You can't outrun the past, she murmured to herself, a bitter smile playing on her lips. It has a way of catching up with you.
Meanwhile, Jonathan found himself back at the church, the sanctuary silent, save for the creaking of wooden pews. The events of the past few days weighed heavily on him, each revelation a stone upon his soul. He knelt at the altar, seeking solace in prayer, but the answers he sought eluded him. Why, Lord, he whispered, his voice raw with emotion. Why show us such darkness, if not to guide us toward the light? But doubt was a shadow that Jonathan refused to let consume him. With renewed purpose, he rose to his feet, resolved to find meaning in their harrowing journey. Across town, Reginald was neck-deep in research, his study a chaotic mess of books and scrolls. Unable to let go of the crypt's secrets, he delved deeper into the history of the Resurrectionist Society, convinced there was more to uncover. "Damn it, there's gotta be a link," he muttered, frustration boiling over. Something we're missing. The truth had always been his guiding star, no matter how dark the path, and pressed on, determined to uncover the Society's legacy in its entirety.
As the days turned to weeks, the trio found themselves drawn back together, their fates entwined by the shadows they had dared to confront. It was in the quiet of Jonathan's study that they gathered once more, the air thick with the weight of unspoken truths. "We can't just walk away, can we?" Margaret asked, her gaze steady as she scanned their faces. "Not when there's still so much we don't understand."
"No, we can't," Jonathan agreed, his voice steady but burdened. "The dead may rest, but their story is far from over." Reginald nodded, his eyes alight with a fervor that refused to be extinguished. "Then let's finish it, for them and for us." And so they embarked on a new quest, guided by fragments of knowledge and the ghosts of those who had come before. The path was fraught with danger, the price of truth often paid in blood and sacrifice, but they were undeterred, driven by a shared resolve.
In the hushed corridors of academia, Margaret unearthed forgotten manuscripts and occult artifacts, piecing together the Society's true purpose, a purpose that transcended death and sought a more sinister form of immortality.
"They didn't just want to cheat death," she revealed, her eyes dark with the weight of her discovery. "They wanted to become gods, and in doing so they unleashed hell instead," Jonathan replied, the gravity of their task clearer than ever. "Then we'll do what they couldn't," Reginald declared, his voice hardened by conviction. "We'll finish what they started, but on our terms." Together, they delved into the depths of the Society's secrets, navigating a world of moral ambiguity and ethical challenges where right and wrong blurred into shades of gray. Along the way, they discovered not only the truth but also themselves, their friendship forged in the crucible of adversity.
Margaret found strength in vulnerability, learning that true courage lay in facing one's fears. Jonathan discovered that faith was not the absence of doubt, but the ability to persist despite it. Reginald, ever the seeker of truth, learned that sometimes the answers lay not in books, but in the human heart.
And so, in the shadow of the past, they stood together, their bonds unbroken by the darkness they had faced. For in the heart of night, they had found the light, and in that light, they had found themselves. As they gazed out across the horizon, the dawn breaking over Hollow's End, they knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. For they were not merely survivors of the past, but the architects of a future yet unwritten. A future where the echoes of the Resurrectionist Society would serve not as a warning but as a testament to the enduring power of humanity's unyielding spirit. Yet even as they stood at the brink of dawn, the specters of the past lingered just at the edge of consciousness, refusing to be banished so easily. Shadows shifted in the minds of Jonathan, Margaret, and Reginald, each grappling with the unsettling notion that the resurrection of the past was not yet complete.
Margaret, emboldened by their discoveries and the bonds they had forged, decided it was time to delve deeper into the Society's most secretive rituals. She knew there were layers of deceit and ambition yet to be unearthed. The candlelight flickered over the pages of another ancient manuscript as she deciphered the arcane symbols with painstaking care, each translation uncovering darker intentions. "They believed power could transcend mortality," she muttered, her voice echoing through the stillness of the room. But what they didn't account for was the price of such ambition.
Meanwhile, Reginald had taken to exploring the darker corners of Hollow's End, where whispers of the Society's influence still reverberated in hushed tones. The town, with its cobblestone streets and Gothic architecture, seemed to breathe with its own malevolent life, holding secrets that only the brave dared to seek. "Fuck this place," he muttered under his breath as he pushed open the door to a decrepit tavern, its patrons casting suspicious glances his way. "If these bastards think they can hide their sins forever, they're sorely mistaken." He approached the bar, leaning in to catch the bartender's attention. "Heard any stories about folks who think they can play God?" he asked, his voice low and deliberate.
The bartender, a woman with sharp eyes and a guarded demeanor, looked him over, her expression unreadable. Depends who's asking, she replied, pouring him a drink with practiced precision.
Jonathan, on the other hand, found himself drawn back to the church, not for prayer this time, but for answers of a different kind. He had been rummaging through the archives, hoping to find any references that might have been overlooked, any shred of evidence that might illuminate the true nature of the Society's agenda. We can't let them get away with it, he told himself, his hands steady as he shuffled through the dusty files. There's got to be something we're missing. As the evening sun cast long shadows through the stained glass windows, a glimmer of something caught his eye. A ledger, faded with age, yet meticulously preserved. It contained names, dates, and transactions that hinted at a network far more extensive than any of them had imagined.
That night, the three gathered once more, Jonathan spreading the ledger across the table in Margaret's apartment. The room was dimly lit, the atmosphere electric with anticipation.
Look at this, Jonathan urged, pointing to a series of entries. There's a pattern here, payments and gatherings that coincide with key events.
Holy shit, Margaret breathed, disbelief tinging her voice. They've been manipulating this town for generations.
And they've got connections, political, financial. This is bigger than we thought, Reginald, his curiosity piqued, studied the ledger intently.
Then we need to bring them down, Margaret declared, her resolve hardening, once and for all.
As they devised their plan, the shadows of Hollow's End seemed to lengthen, as if the town itself was aware of what was to come. The stakes had risen, the danger palpable and ever-present. But Margaret, Jonathan, and Reginald were undeterred, united by a shared purpose and the unshakable bonds they had forged in the crucible of adversity. The night was long and dark, the air thick with tension and the promise of revelations yet to come. And as they prepared to confront the legacy of the Resurrectionist Society, they knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. For they had become more than allies. They were a force to be reckoned with, the architects of a future where darkness would no longer hold sway. And so, beneath the watchful gaze of the moon, they stepped into the night, ready to challenge the shadows and reclaim the light. Their journey was far from over, but they were prepared, their spirits unyielding and their hearts aflame with the fire of justice.
Margaret closed the ledger with a definitive snap, her eyes burning with a fiery resolve that sent ripples through the dimly lit room. "We need to act fast," she said, her voice a low, urgent whisper. "Every second we waste is another second these bastards have to cover their tracks."
Reginald leaned back in his chair, a cigarette angling from his lips, the smoke curling up like a ghost seeking freedom. "You think we can really take them down? These people aren't just rich, Margaret. They've got power, real fucking power."
"I don't give a damn how powerful they are, Reg. They bleed just like the rest of us, and it's high time they learn there's a price for their sins."
Jonathan, who had been silent, his brow furrowed in thought, finally spoke up. "We have the ledger, but we need more than that. We need witnesses, evidence that can't be dismissed or buried."
Then we start with the people, those who've been wronged, who know the truth. We get them to speak, to stand with us.
Reginald crushed his cigarette into the ashtray, his jaw set with determination. "Then let's do it. I've got some contacts who might be willing to talk if we can protect them." Jonathan glanced between them, feeling a surge of hope. "We're not just doing this for ourselves. We're doing it for everyone who's ever been trampled by these assholes." The next day, as dawn broke over Hollow's End, the trio set out on their mission. The town, with its brooding architecture and history steeped in shadows, watched silently as they went about their business.
Margaret approached an elderly woman in the market square, her eyes softening with understanding. "Mrs. Collins, we need your help." The woman looked up, her eyes weary and full of memories best forgotten. "Why now, dear?" "What's the point in stirring the past? Because it's not just the past, Mrs. Collins. It's happening now, and it will keep happening unless we do something." Mrs. Collins sighed, her gaze drifting to the distant hills. "All right, I'll tell you what I know. But you have to promise me one thing. Whatever happens, you keep my grandchildren safe." Margaret placed a comforting hand on her arm. "I promise. We won't let anything happen to them."
Meanwhile, Reginald sat across from a burly dock worker in a rundown cafe, the air thick with the scent of frying bacon and stale coffee. "You really think you can take them down?" the dock worker asked, skepticism etched into his weathered features. Reginald nodded, leaning forward. "With your help, yeah. We just need to know what you saw that night. The dock worker hesitated, glancing around nervously. All right, but this stays between us, yeah? I saw them, the society members, doing something at the docks. Something they shouldn't have been. Reginald locked eyes with him, his voice steady. And if you tell us everything, we can make sure they pay for it. The dock worker nodded, a flicker of resolve in his eyes. All right, let's do it. Fuck those bastards.
As night fell, Jonathan found himself in the church once more, the air heavy with the scent of incense. He knelt at the altar, not in prayer, but in reflection, as he considered the gravity of their undertaking.
We're doing the right thing, he whispered to himself, the words barely audible in the cavernous silence, even if it feels like we're walking into a storm.
A voice broke the silence, and he turned to see Sister Mary standing there, her expression one of understanding. Sometimes, Jonathan, it's the storms that cleanse the world. What?
He nodded, a sense of calm washing over him. Thank you, sister. We're going to need all the strength we can get.
She smiled softly, a beacon of light in the encroaching darkness. You have it, and more. Just remember, you're not alone.
With that, Jonathan rose, a newfound determination fueling his steps as he joined his friends, the night promising both danger and the hope of redemption. Their paths were set, and there was no turning back. Together, they would confront the shadows, ready to banish them with the light of truth.
Margaret stepped out into the cool night air, her breath mingling with the mist that curled like spectral fingers around the cobblestones. They had gathered crucial testimonies, but there was still much to do. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, a harsh reminder of the world they were fighting against. She glanced at the screen and saw a familiar name.
Margaret, the voice crackled through the receiver as she answered. It's Alan, I found something. You need to see this.
Where are you? Margaret asked, her pace quickening as she headed towards the rendezvous point.
Meet me at the old warehouse down by the river, Alan replied, his voice a mix of excitement and anxiety. And hurry. This shit's bigger than we thought. Meanwhile, Reginald and Jonathan were locked in a tense discussion in the dimly lit back room of the pub. The air was thick with smoke and the murmur of patrons nursing their drinks. We've got witnesses, Reginald said, running a hand through his hair. But we need to connect the dots. Find the money trail that leads to their fucking doorsteps. Jonathan nodded, a slight frown creasing his brow. I might know someone. An old contact from my university days. She's a forensic accountant and owes me a favor. Reginald leaned forward, eyes alight with renewed determination. Get in touch with her. We need every bit of help we can get. Jonathan grabbed his phone, already mentally drafting the message. I'll set up a meeting.
As Margaret approached the warehouse, she felt a shiver of foreboding. Alan was waiting outside, his face tense under the flickering street lamp.
You won't believe what I found, Alan said as he guided her inside, the creak of the metal door echoing ominously.
What is it? Margaret asked, her eyes scanning the shadows.
He led her to a corner where a laptop sat open on a dusty table. Emails, documents, they're all here. Proof of offshore accounts, transfers, it's enough to bury them.
Margaret stared at the screen, the implications dawning on her. This could be it, the smoking gun we need.
Alan nodded, a grim smile playing on his lips. But it's dangerous, Margaret. They won't hesitate to come after anyone who has this.
Then we make sure they don't know it's us. We play this smart.
Back at the pub, Jonathan received a text from his contact, confirming a meeting the next day. It was a small but significant victory in their uphill battle. She's agreed to help, Jonathan announced, turning to Reginald. We might just have a fighting chance. Reginald clapped him on the back, a rare smile breaking through his usual stoic demeanor. Good, because we're gonna need every fucking edge we can get. As they continued to plan, the gravity of their mission weighed heavily on them. They were up against a powerful adversary, one with resources far beyond their own. But they had something the society didn't, a cause worth fighting for. With each piece of evidence, every testimony, they were stitching together a narrative too compelling to ignore.
Later that night, Margaret sat alone, the weight of their undertaking pressing down on her shoulders. She thought of the people relying on them, those who had risked everything to come forward. She whispered into the quiet, "We're going to do this, for all of them."
And as dawn broke once more over Hollow's End, the trio stood ready, united in purpose and driven by the fire of justice that burned fiercely within each of them. The battle lines were drawn, and there was no turning back. Jonathan paced the narrow confines of his apartment, his mind racing with possibilities and plans. The sun had barely peeked over the horizon, yet the urgency of their mission left no room for rest. He knew that every passing hour brought them closer to the inevitable confrontation with forces that played dirty, without hesitation.
Margaret, on the other hand, sat at her kitchen table, a steaming cup of coffee in hand. The aroma did little to calm her nerves as she sifted through the evidence Alan had uncovered. Scrolling through the documents, her gaze catching on figures and names, it was clear they were on the brink of something massive, a Pandora's box of corruption and deceit.
Reginald joined her, his presence a steadying force. We need to make sure that when we pull the trigger, there's no going back. We have to hit them hard enough that they won't have a chance to recover.
"We will," Margaret replied, her voice firm. "But first, we need to ensure our safety. We can't let them know we're onto them until it's too late."
Reginald nodded, understanding the delicate balance they had to maintain. "I'll talk to a guy I know. He's ex-military, good with security. He can help us keep this under wraps."
"Thanks, Reginald. Every bit of precaution counts."
Meanwhile, Jonathan met with his contact Sarah, a forensic accountant known for her sharp eye and discretion. They sat in a quiet cafe, the early morning crowd providing a perfect cover for their conversation.
"So, Jonathan," Sarah began, looking over the files he'd brought, "what exactly are you dealing with here?"
"Something huge, Sarah. We've got evidence that links a lot of powerful people to some very shady shit. We need to trace the money to prove it."
She smirked, a glint of challenge in her eyes. "Money doesn't lie. If there's a trail, I'll find it. Just make sure my name stays out of it."
"Absolutely. Your involvement is strictly between us." Jonathan felt a surge of relief knowing he had someone of her caliber on their side.
Back at the warehouse, Margaret and Alan continued to piece together the digital puzzle before them. The tension between them was palpable, not just from the danger they faced, but also from the unresolved feelings simmering beneath the surface.
"You know, we make a pretty good team," Alan said, breaking the silence with a smirk.
Margaret rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a smile. "Don't let it go to your head. We're not out of the woods yet."
His expression sobered, the weight of their situation pulling him back to reality. "I know. Just be careful, okay? I don't want anything happening to you."
"I will," she promised, their eyes locking in a moment of shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken bond between them.
That night, the trio gathered at Jonathan's place, the cramped living room serving as their war room. The air was thick with anticipation as they laid out their strategy, every detail scrutinized and refined. "We need to synchronize our moves," Jonathan emphasized, pointing to the timeline they'd mapped out. "If one of us gets compromised, it all falls apart."
"Then we make damn sure no one gets compromised," Margaret shot back, her resolve unyielding. "We're in this together."
Reginald nodded, a sense of camaraderie settling over them. "Together, let's bring these bastards down."
As they finalized preparations, Margaret felt a flicker of hope. They were up against a Goliath, but with every plant they set into motion, every ally they secured, they were chipping away at its armor.
The stakes were high, the risks even higher, but they were united in their cause. And as the night deepened, the promise of justice glimmered on the horizon, like a beacon in the dark. They were ready to face whatever lay ahead, knowing that together they were unstoppable.
The end. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, ring the bell, and tell your friends about my listening library.